Adonai Eloheinu, Melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay, wrong one. See, I did good, Orlando, actually. Did you erase this?
Oh, no.
Oh, man.
Did you erase that?
No, I would never do that.
What was that about being good?
Oh my
Flip
gosh,
over.
Somebody
Flip
wasn't
over.
so
good.
sorry.
Who was in here?
I don't know who.
Oh, that's so frustrating.
Wow, okay.
Oh,
How would
sorry.
anybody do that?
I did all
That's
these
so
notes.
weird.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
really very irritating. Okay.
Could be around the corner or nobody.
Do we have 3 boards?
No.
No, someone cleaned this.
Oh my goodness.
No.
Okay, well, that happens. All right.
Should be good.
That's okay. I'm just going to have to refer to Wikipedia then for dates. Okay. That's a little frustrating, I have to be honest. Because I came into this. Can you see who was actually in here after I left at 1 o'clock?
It's good. Okay. All right.
All right. So here's what happens. It's a bummer. Is we have the Gaonic period. And right after the 70 of the Common Era, we have the destruction of the temple, right? And we have what is called the diaspora, which means dispersion. And we disperse all over the world. Those who go into Eastern Europe are called Ashkenazi. I'd really like to know who's in here since 1 o'clock, because you weren't here and I wasn't here.
Yeah, no, I wasn't here.
No, so
You did. You forgot to lock. I can see because I came in here.
no, I locked and I put on the I locked and I put on the alarm. Okay, so you have Ashkenazi who go into Eastern Europe. Yeah, there's a camera. I'd like to know who was in here that didn't lock up. You have Sephardi. Well, it means someone was in here doing something.
Right, but there's things they shouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd like to know if someone else was in here, Orlando. Sephardi, which means Spain. And those are the Jews who go into through the Saudi Peninsula into Spain, Morocco, Portugal, etc. And then a subsect of Sephardi are called Mizrahi. Okay, and those are the ones who stay in the Saudi Peninsula. We talked about the Gaonic period. So they start picking up the customs of where they are. Elena, can we turn off the heat, please? Elena, can we turn off the heat, please? Thank you. In both rooms, thanks. All right, so they start going, we go all over. We're dispersed. We start picking up the habits, as we discussed, of the people that we are around. Let me a little brighter pen. So we start to pick up these habits. We get through the Gaonic period, and now we have a Siddur, the prayer book that we discussed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you get what are called Shuvot, which means responses. So let's talk about how do we have laws in the United States. We have a constitution. Oh, you okay? We have a constitution, right? And from this constitution, we start getting Supreme Court opinions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Local opinions, appellate court opinions, district court opinions, etc. And then we get opinions based on those opinions. And from that, we get law, right? Isn't that how it works in this country?
Mm-hmm.
So we get a constitutional amendment that says slavery is no longer allowed, right? And then we get how that becomes manifest after the Civil War. We start getting how do we desegregate with Brown versus the Board of Education, right? And that's how laws develop. Jewish law, same thing. We got the Tanakh, we got the Talmud, but it keeps getting developed. And there are certain commentators that need to be recognized as part, and I'm going to have to, I put all those notes up there. But I'm more concerned actually who was in here.
Yeah, who was in here?
Because Orlando.
They're the kids. They're probably the kids. They were
What kids?
the
Is there a class about it?
the Hebrew school. practice the
Oh, so Tig was in here.
tick and the tick with
L.
L and tricky.
Oh, okay, so they erased the board then. Got it. And they didn't lock up. So we got to remind them to lock up.
No. You forgot.
I locked up. I pressed in the code. I know I did.
Because I opened the door for them, so I can repeat it.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I could be wrong, but I pressed R and pressed. Okay, so we have these.
Rabbi is right even when he's wrong.
No, Rabbi's not right. I'm the first one to admit when I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure that's okay. So you start getting these commentators who write commentaries and they start doing law. So the law is described in the Tanakh, and then it's explained more in the Talmud. But now we start getting how do you practice it, especially when the laws are no longer applicable if it was a temple-based law. Does that make sense to everybody? How do I go do a sacrifice? What do? We talked about becoming a people of the book. We talked about having a portable homeland. What do? So you start getting these responses called shuvah.
So sorry.
I'm going to throw something shortly. You start getting responses called shuvah. Okay, and you start getting rabbis who are writing these shuvah. Now, what ends up happening is people end up getting acronym names. So one of the first ones is a guy named Rashi. His name is actually Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchak. So
I never put that together.
I can leave now. Y'all have a nice night.
You know how sometimes you get one of those moments? The aha.
Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Moshe. Okay. Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman. Okay. So they start getting known by these acronyms. Okay. They get known by the acronyms. Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchak, Rashi. I want to preface this with saying I am not a fan of Rashi. Okay. For a lot of reasons. But I'm definitely but I'm the only one who may admit it. So he's 1040 to 1105, and he's in Spain. So where is he? Is he Sephardic or Ashkenazi? Very good. Okay. So he's Sephardic and he's brilliant. Now there's a whole theory that Rashi didn't write Rashi. His daughters actually wrote all the work. There's that theory. He comments on the entire Tanakh. He comments on the Talmud. I think he's an arrogant Yahoo. He's brilliant. I just find him uninteresting. His commentaries, to give an idea, a book this size, okay, this size print, this size, right, is his commentary. This isn't it. Is his commentary on just the book of Genesis.
Just the book of Genesis.
Well, yeah, look, I spent 6 months just studying once a week with a group of us. We're studying just the first 2 lines of Genesis. And he explores each word and you tear apart. And okay. So Rashi, now I don't like Rashi because he actually develops his own Hebrew script called Rashi script. That if you're going to study Rashi, you need to learn Rashi's script. I mean, they have translations now, but to study his script, and it doesn't look like Hebrew letters. It's similar, but not the same. So I just find this level of arrogance of, okay, not only do I have to study your stuff, but you think you're so important, I got to study it in a whole different script for my language. I just, it's like instead of an A looking like an A might look like this. It's offensive. But that's just me. There's the old teaching in most yeshivas that you should have one hand on the Tanakh or the Talmud and the other hand pointing to Rashi's commentary because he's brilliant. There's no question he's brilliant. My other issues, his viewing perspective of the world is not one that I personally resonate to. Okay? You got a guy called Rambam. Oh, there we got some print. There we go. Rambam, also known as Maimonides. Same guy.
Who knew these people had different names?
This is, okay, and Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Moshe. Okay? I want to get you the dates for him as well, just so you have some ideas on this. What we're talking, the time period we're talking. I've written all this down. I'm so bummed out. So Rambam is 1138 to 1204. He also Sephardic. Rambam is born in what part of Spain, if I recall right? He is born in Cordova. Okay. Rambam ends up becoming a doctor and a philosopher. His philosophy is still studied in introduction to philosophy classes at universities around the world. And a doctor, there's stuff that he does that is still studied by first-year medical students. He becomes the doctor, the court physician for the vizier of Egypt. And it's said that he spent 8 hours a day being the court physician, 8 hours a day being a physician to all the poor people, and 8 hours a day doing Jewish commentary, which, given the massive amount of work he produced, actually would not surprise me. He writes a book, a series of volumes, called Mishnah Torah, which means the second Torah. He actually says in his introduction to Mishnah Torah that if you learn my volumes, you don't actually need to read the Torah, which would be arrogant, except it may be true in terms of what are the laws and how do you practice them. So here's a book, Hilchot Shuvot. How do you make tshuva with people? Okay, all the different laws. And he's the one who starts to identify the 613 laws that we talk about that are in the Torah. Okay. He also writes an amazing piece that people like to ignore because it's a different, whole different mindset, called Guide to the Perplexed. Again, I am in the minority. Most people will tell you he's a rationalist, and Guide to the Perplexed is just a weird book that he wrote. I would tell you, and that he's an Aristotelian. I would say no, he was actually an integrated mystic who, this is how you do the laws, but this is where you get to. But Rambam is the great, we'd say there's been, since Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses back in Exodus, to Moshe ben Moshe, there was never another Moshe like Moshe. Right? He was this great, again, commentary on the Tanakh, commentary on the Talmud, amazing scholar, amazing wise man, amazing amount of material that he ends up covering. A guy named the Ramban, who is Nachmanides. Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman. Ramban lives, and I'm a big fan of Ramban, actually. Just so you don't think I'm not a fan of anybody. I'm a big fan of Ramban. Ramban, who lives in 1194 to 1270 in Spain. And actually, Rashi is not in Spain, as I remember. Rashi is actually in France. But still Sephardic. Ramban, who also lives from Spain, does commentaries just like Ramban, but his commentaries are more mystically inclined. They're looking at a deeper level. Okay? One of the things I really love him is at that time, the Catholic Church wanted to prove that Judaism is not as good a religion as Catholicism. So they had what are called the disputations. So we're going to have a debate as to which religion is okay, is better. And we have three bishops who are going to be the judges. So we already know where this is going, right? No one's got the courage to do it except Ramban, and there are transcripts of the debates. They're called the disputations, and it was a draw, which means, given that there are three bishops as judges, it means he won. Okay. Brilliant being. His commentaries are just rich in a way. And again, all these commentators are all different people, and they all have different viewing perspectives of the world, just like today. And you go with the ones, you start with the ones that resonate to you. We have a guy named Rabbeinu Barclay. Barclay lives, I've written all of this down, 1050 to 1120. and he is from the Andalusian area in Spain. Okay. Now, one of the things that Bacchia does is his commentary is based on the level of what's called pardes. This is the root of the word paradise. Pardes means orchard. But it also is an acronym, PRDS, for Peshat, Remez, Drash, Sod. 4 different ways of evaluating any piece of Torah. So, an example. Peshat is the simple understanding. The rabbi picked up the cup of coffee that his wife had made. Okay, and took a drink. That's Peshat. The text says. Remez. Okay. The rabbi saw the coffee, moved his arms, closed his fist around the coffee drink, contracted his bicep to bring it to his mouth, took a sip, swallowed it, went down his esophagus. Is one more true than the other? So that's Remez. Drash. The rabbi's wife knew that he liked to drink coffee drinks. And so she made him a sugar-free coffee vanilla milkshake, sugar-free, so he could drink it while he was at class. As he brought it with him to class, after speaking with one of the people in the class and starting the class, he realized that he was a little thirsty, and he saw that this magnificent drink that his beautiful wife had made for him was there. And so he decided to have a drink which quenched his thirst and simultaneously made him want even more. Drash. Story. Sod. There's a rabbi, and this rabbi in Westlake Village doesn't get a lot of sleep and has a real love for sweet desserts, but knows that sugar is not so good for him. So he tries to drink things that will satisfy that sweetness, keep him a little bit more lively, and are not really horrible for him. His wife, who loves him very much, realizes this, and so she has decided that rather than waste the money, $7 every time going to Coffee Bean, she has the sugar-free syrup in her own home, so that she, anytime he's going to go out, can make this drink for him. So she has plastic cups, and in this particular case, she didn't have a large cup, she only had a medium-sized cup, that she gave to him a drink so he could take it with him to class, so in case he wanted to have a drink, he could drink it. Are any of those more true than the other? They're all just different understandings, right? From the Peshat, which is the simplest, to Sod, which means secret. Bacchia evaluates the entire Torah on each of these levels. So he'll look at it, and he'll look at a piece, and he'll say the Peshat level is, but the Remez level is this, and the Sod level talks about this. I love Bacchia. He's actually called one of the few rabbis who's called rabbinic, meaning all of our rabbis. Okay? I love his commentaries. All these are extensive commentaries. So as an example, Bach is 7 volumes to cover the Torah. Okay, so I mean, we're talking a serious, these are serious commentators. Okay, that's why when someone asks me why, how they go down to another town, they say, "What rabbi would you recommend? How do I find a rabbi?" My answer is read what he's written. Read what he has written. You want to know about me? I got lots of writings you can read that are both religious and non-religious, but they give a worldview. Okay, who is this guy? What's his worldview in life? Right? How does he relate to God? How does he relate to religion? How does he relate to the Torah portion? Does he only talk? Is he a rabbi who is constantly saying Rambam says and making himself feel very look how erudite I am and how knowledgeable I am of commentators, or does he not bother going into the quotes of that and just gives the essence of the teachings based on Torah? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Find who you like. Okay. Bacchia. Now, there are other commentaries. Now, the Mishnah Torah becomes this really big piece about how do you observe the Torah? How do you observe the laws? But it's very complicated to go through and how do you express them? So what ends up happening is there's a guy named Jacob ben Asher, Yaakov ben Asher, And he's not known by an acronym. He's known as the Tur. Because he writes a book called Arba'in Turi, 4 columns, where he splits out the 613 laws and how to observe them into 4 columns. Now, the Tur lives in 1270 to 1340. And he lives in Sephardi. I'm trying to see where he lives. He lives in Cologne, which is also Spain, right? Okay, so he's also Spain. So you're seeing a commonality here with what's going on. And remember, I referred to the convivencia period, where there was Jewish and Islamic and Catholic minds. I think I referred to that a couple weeks ago, last week. They were all growing together. You can see this is that time period, isn't it? Okay. So what the Tur does is he creates this understanding of the laws into Arba'in Turim, into 4 columns. He structures it like this, under different categories. It's fabulous. And now it becomes a way of looking at how do we do these laws. He's followed up by a guy named Joseph Carroll. Let me see what his dates are. Okay. Yeah, he's followed up by a guy named Joseph Carroll. Carroll lives in Sfat. He actually lives in Israel. Okay? And he lives there 1488 to 1575. And he builds on what the Tur has done and what Rambam has done. And he creates a book of law. How do you practice the laws? Have I lost anyone yet? Not all? I'll try and work on that. So he creates a book of laws. I mean, the set table known as the Shulchan Aruch. Have you heard of that phrase before, the Shulchan Aruch? Where that becomes the text and the source text when people say, how do you observe a law? Well, the Shulchan Aruch says, okay, Shulchan Aruch says you can't move the coffee drink. Right? But let's remember, he's basing his stuff on the Tur, who's basing his stuff also on Rambam, who's basing his stuff on Talmud and Tanakh. Do you see how these responses are like the legal opinions? Brown versus Board of Education doesn't happen without the 16th Amendment, right? So things, how it all builds on each other. His get picked up, although the conservative movement of a couple decades ago was starting to be friendly to the Tur. Shulchan Aruch really becomes the compendium of law of how you practice Judaism, right?
Does it give any of the rationale or just the law?
It pretty much gives only law. I mean, it gives some rationale, but I don't think very well. Okay, but again, I'm in a minority. Okay, I don't like do this, don't do that. I think as soon as you go do this, don't do that, you miss Elu ve'elu. These words and these words are both living God. So I like to go back to Rambam. I like to go back to Talmud as opposed to going to Shulchan Aruch. Because remember, this is already now 15th, 16th century. Okay. Now, his gets picked up as well because it's written in Israel, as opposed to being written anywhere in the diaspora. In Sfat, you also have another commentator, whose name, I'm technically on here. Nope, I put it on this one. I'm so irritated about this.
Next time you'll take a picture of your board when you're done.
Oh, no, I won't.
Yeah, the kids were.
No, it's fine. I normally don't do it, so it's no big. It's normally I normally don't do it, so it's no big deal. 1534 to 1572. Erase these guys. Does this? You guys got all that? Not that you're necessarily going to remember them. One thing you can do is each year you study a different commentator. But that gives you now when you heard Rambam, now you know who it is. Rambam Maimonides, same guy.
Wow.
Okay. So a guy shows up, also in Sfat.
You can't tell.
Yeah. So this guy shows up in 1534 to 1572, which means he's a very young man when he dies. And his name, also in Sfat, and his name is Rabbi Isaac Luria. He is also known as Ha-Ari, which means the lion. Okay. Sometimes we say Arizal, which means, ZL may be remembered for a blessing, so the Ari of blessed memory. And Ari not only means, remember, Isaac, Ari also means Rabbi Isaac, and some say that the olive stands for the holy Rabbi Isaac, and some say for the Ashkenazi Rabbi Isaac, because he's actually Ashkenazi, or his ancestors are, and he's in spot. Now, what does he do? He becomes what is known as the foundation of, when people talk about Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism. They're not talking Jewish mysticism. They're talking what came out of Ari. This was an incredible mystic, incredible teacher. And, he dies, and he's 37 years old. He dies. He's 37. And when people talk about Jewish mysticism, they typically are talking about Luria. So his commentaries and his dialogue is all going to be about mysticism. So what is Jewish mysticism? Aha! Oh, me too. Okay. There are only two real questions in life. How and why did God create the world? How and why does God sustain the world? Everything else is trivialities. Right? Those are the two big questions. You understand God, those are the two big questions. God, how and why did you do this? And how and why are you still doing this? Right? Does that make sense? So, from the beginning of Judaism, we have two schools, Maaseh Bereshit and Maaseh Merkavah. Maaseh Bereshit means the workings of creation. Stop. Okay, I don't have to turn that off. Quiet. The workings of creation. How and why did God create the universe? Maaseh Bereshit, Maaseh Merkavah. How and why does God sustain the universe? What does the heavenly court look like? The workings of the chariot. Why is it called the chariot? Because it's the first chapter of the book of Ezekiel. This is the tailor in Hong Kong. No, that's literally what he is, because he's supposed to be coming here. Okay. So the chariot, the first chapter of the book of Ezekiel, talks about Ezekiel's vision about how the world exists and God's heavenly chariot. So this is how and why God sustains the universe, as opposed to how and why God created. So if we go back to our handouts, very first week, we see, remember, we broke apart this word Bereshit. How many of you remember that?
Mhm.
Right? With the beginning, and that would become under the category of Maaseh Bereshit, the workings of creation. How and why did God create? And those two schools are discussed throughout the Talmud in terms of, this guy's focusing on how and why did God create, this guy's focusing on how and why does God sustain, how do we sustain, how do we create, etc. Okay? And part of the goal, as understood, is this concept of Yahud, which means unification. How do we become conscious of our relationship with God so that it is unified and does not have a veil? Does that make sense to everybody? How can we be conscious of God in every space and in every moment? This is Yahud, unification. It's also, by the way, the term that is used for what a bride and groom do on their wedding night. Okay, that their souls are unified. Yes. So, what Luria does, so you have the Talmud, and then you have some other very special sacred books that come out. There's a book called Sefer Yetzirah, which means the book of formation. You have Sefer HaBahir, book of illumination. Sefer Yetzirah tells us what's the structure of the universe. It's attributed to Father Abraham. Sefer Bahir is attributed to a first century sage, and it tells us what connects the structure together. Everyone follow me? These are esoteric concepts. So Sefer Yetzirah explains all it's based on things that are hidden in Torah and Tanakh, what the structure is, but here it tells us how it connects. So think of a spider web, right? There are points that the spider has sat on at different points, right, to make that web. Those points are what's discussed in Sefer Yetzirah. But here is the strands that connect the different points. Does that analogy work for you guys? Okay. If you have a question online, just chime on it. So you have these two ancient texts, and then in the Middle Ages, a text is discovered, although it's talked about in other places, called Zohar. We attribute it to a Talmudic sage, although academics say it was written pseudepigraphically. It was written by another person in that sage's name, 1,000 years, 1,500 years later. But you have these books that start to talk about, and these texts and these schools and studying that are about the exploration, not just of, move the coffee cup, don't move the coffee cup, but of these deeper levels of awareness. Okay, so not just that you start looking at using the coffee as an analogy. Why does the rabbi like sweet drinks? Why is the sugar not good for him? Right? Why does he get thirsty? How is coffee produced? How is what's the difference between how a sugar-free drink is produced and a non-sugar-free drink? Does that make sense to everybody? She's starting to explore those things. What Luria does is Luria, in his genius, takes all of what's gone before him and integrates it together. So he takes Maaseh Bereshit, Maaseh Merkavah, Sefer Yetzirah, Sefer HaBehir, all these different texts and teachings. Rambam, Guide to the Perplexed, Talmud, all these things. And he integrates it together into one unified understanding or system. Okay? And that becomes known as Kabbalah. But that's the wrong name for it. Okay? So you hear me talk about Jewish mysticism a lot. You don't often hear me talk about Kabbalah. Here's why. When people refer to Jewish mysticism, when they refer to these different things, they refer to Kabbalah. What they're really referring to is Lurianic Kabbalah, his integration, not the original sources. Okay? So when someone says, this sphere is here, this sphere is here, this is how this energy works, these are the four worlds, they're looking at his interpretation as opposed to the original experience. Why is this an important distinction? And why do I have problems with the way that so many people teach Jewish mysticism? If you learn, how many of you have studied any Jewish mysticism at all? Okay. So someone says this energy center is called Yesod, meaning foundation. This one is called Tiferet, meaning harmony. This one is called, because Luria said so. That's dogma, isn't it? Right? That's just dogma. That's not an experience. That's not an understanding. That's not integrated into Torah. That's just, Luria said that this is called Yesod. Therefore, Kabbalah says this energy center around our nether regions, our private area, is called Yesod, meaning foundation. That becomes dogma. And then the person who hasn't really, really studied it then says, well, that's because it's our sexual energy that is the foundation of who we are as human beings. Okay, which is a decent interpretation, but it has nothing to do with why it's called Yesod. Has nothing to do with it at all. We're going to look at why it is actually called that in a moment. So my objection to the way that this stuff is taught all too often is that, especially in the non-ultra-Orthodox world, is that It's not true because even in the ultra-Orthodox world, it's taught this way too often, especially in Kabbalah. But it is the idea of saying this is the way it is, as opposed to putting in the context of the greater normative Judaism. Judaism is not a rational tradition. Judaism is not an irrational tradition. Judaism is a non-rational tradition. Rational, A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D. Irrational, A leads to X, which leads to 3, which leads to J. Non-rational. The experience of A leads me to an experience of E, I, O, U. Okay, does that make sense? And sometimes to an experience of Y. It also leads me to B, and it also leads me to Z. Okay, to Z. Does that make sense? That's non-rational thinking. That's how human beings actually think. Right? When I talk to someone who has lost somebody, let's see, write just down bullet points. I want to know about the person. Write down bullet points of your memories or thoughts about it. Not in any consecutive order, just what happens. And so someone says, well, I remember, going on a cruise with Grandpa to Mexico and how much fun he had. And then I remember being in Mexico and listening to this great Latin music. And then I remember when Grandpa took me to see Carlos Santana at the Hollywood Bowl. Grandpa loved old rock and roll. He was a big Rolling Stones fan and had been up in San Francisco during the days of Haight-Ashbury and the Golden Gate Theater. Right? I'll lose my phone. All right, all those kind of things. Those seem like they're disconnected. They're certainly not A leading to B leading to C leading to D, but they are, right? Because the cruise made him think of Mexico, which then triggered the brain to remember the Latin music, which then triggered the brain to remember Carlos Santana, which triggered the brain to remember Hollywood Bowl, and rock and roll, which triggered the brain to remember Rolling Stones, which triggered the brain to remember Haight-Ashbury, etc. Do you guys see that? We think non-rationally. Our conversations, our dialogues are non-rational. But we try and make them rational, force them into that box. Well, what happens is that Luria and all of this work ends up it's a non-rational experience. Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching says that the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. Okay? You can't really talk about what's infinite, can you? Who was a kid? Who was a child? Describe how much you love your child.
You can't. I mean, you love them, but
You can't.
and,
You
know,
you can
down
speak all the
inside,
words.
Right.
Not enough.
Right.
Right? Who's lost someone that they loved dearly? Describe the pain. Can't, can you?
No, I can't.
That which is most real, that really is a unification with the numinous experience, can't be put into rational concepts, words, or thinking. It can only be experienced. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So when you start saying, and these concepts that Luria talks about, these different energy centers and points and pathways that he discusses, which we're going to talk a little bit about, they are only symbols of something that you really can't speak about because it's infinite. So I draw a heart, I fill it in, and I say, that's a symbol for love, right? But is it love? No. So let me ask you a question. Where is the color blue in this room? One place it's blue.
All over me.
In the library,
Your pants.
chairs.
Chairs.
You're all wrong. You're all wrong.
Why?
Well, it's everywhere. It's a lot of different places, but
You're all wrong. It's not in the chairs. It's not in your clothes. It's not in my pants.
it's in our eyes.
It's in our brain. A vibration occurs, actually the way the eyes work is that in the vibration spectrum, one place that is not seen is what we actually see as the color. The vibration of blue means that we attribute to blue is the vibration that isn't there. That's a whole other discussion. It's a negative. That's actually how our eyes work. But it happens in our brain. That's where the color exists. We have collectively decided to say, that's blue, this is blue. But that in no way means that if I could actually see through your eyes, I might look at your shirt and say, well, that looks like what I normally call green. We've collectively decided to say this vibration is blue, but the vibration is deeper than the symbol. Did I lose anybody in that? I did. Okay, so let me explain. All right, so let me explain it again. We say that is fire, right? But the word fire is not that. Fire is a symbol, a word symbol, that we have collectively decided means we're talking about this. But it's not fire, right? Fire is this thing that is different, right? Blue is collectively something we've decided to say this vibration is blue. So we've all decided to say that this is sweet, okay? But not everyone likes the same sweetness because we don't all interpret sweet as the same experience. Does that make sense? We've said chocolate is this certain experience, but that's a collective choice to call it that. Does that make sense? Language of any sort is insignificant when compared to the realities of the universe. It's just a collectively agreed upon way of communicating so we can function together. But there's a much deeper way. You love your child. There are no words to describe that. So we say love. You love your child? Love your husband?
Yes.
Same word, right?
Yeah.
Same feeling? I certainly hope not.
No,
Right?
no, definitely not.
Right?
Right.
And the reason I'm kind of harping on this is because what happens is people start studying Jewish mysticism and they mistake the symbol for the reality. And the reality cannot be experienced just as a symbol. Does that make sense to everyone? Everyone with me now? Okay. Which is why you cannot study, phrase that. I think it was Zalman Schachter Shalom, blessed memory. It was Zalman. I think it was he who said, there are Kabbalists and there are Kabbalologists. Kabbalologists can tell you everything about Jewish mysticism. Kabbalists experiences the unification with God. Okay. I don't care how many of you women have children. I don't care how long you're going to try and explain it to me. Us men will never get what you experienced.
That's what I'm told.
Right? I mean, truthfully. Right? You women will never get what a man feels when he is aroused. Right? There are things that are, we can talk about that we understand. And okay, my kids do not know what it means to be in love with a woman yet. Right? Because they haven't gotten to that place of development. How do you convey to someone who has no frame of reference? How do you convey to the alien who shows up and says, okay, tell me what vanilla ice cream tastes like? How do you convey it? You can't, other than to say, right? You can't experience what it's like to be a parent until you're a parent. We all have a commonality, right? If I talk about my kids acting out as 13-year-olds, you can all relate to it in some way, in whatever way, that The 19-year-old young man can't. Right? Benny can't relate to, Cantor Benny cannot relate to the conversation in the same way, can he?
Well, I would think that he probably had that stuff with his parents.
But not from the same place.
No, not from the same
We were
place.
both Benny and I were camp counselors, but it's not the same.
Right.
You give them back at the end of the session.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's when we're talking about Yehud and Jewish mysticism and these terms, it's important to understand that we're talking about verbal or linguistic symbols or concepts that are not the concept, not the experience of the concept itself. Does that make sense to everybody? This becomes my problem. If you go to the University of Judaism, you take a class, because I haven't taught it there in a number of years, I used to teach there, and you take a class in Jewish mysticism, and or you take in most temples, because it became trendy a number of years ago to learn Kabbalah. So what happened is the rabbi would read one book on Kabbalah and say, okay, I'm going to go teach it. Having no clue what the hell they're talking about. And they go and they say, this is this energy center. This is the way the universe works. Da, 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 da. It's basura. It's garbage. Because it's not that we're talking about symbols for something that is infinite, like the love that you have for your children. And we can't just talk about that. There's no words, is there? We can use poetry. We can use music. We can use art. We can talk around it. I would do this for my child. I would do anything for my child. I did this, whatever it is, right? But you can't put words to the numinous. Again, Lao Tzu's quote, the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. Right? You can't put limits on that which is infinite. And as soon as we put it into words, it's limited. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so everyone's with me on that concept. Okay. Which is why, if one is to study Jewish mysticism, it must be either studying about something. I forget who the professor was who was asked at the university, it was YU or JTS, was asked, can you teach a class will you teach us Kabbalah? And he said, no, but I can teach you a class about Kabbalah. Because Kabbalah is not an academic program. I can teach you about the history and everything else. Does that make sense? Okay. But it's why you can't really understand Jewish mystical practices or understandings without hitbodedut. If you're very Ashkenazi, it might be called hisbodedus. Meditation. So let's talk about what is meditation. So you notice I haven't even gotten into the structure yet, which we may or may not get to. So don't let them erase this board next time. All right. So hisbodedus or hitbodedut is a self-reflexive conjugation of a word. So in examining Hebrew, there's always a root to the word. Okay? And it can be conjugated in multiple ways. It can be conjugated as an active verb, a passive verb, a causative verb, a self-reflective verb. Now, what does that mean? Because none of us remember grammar. I can't remember English grammar, but Hebrew grammar I ended up learning better. Hebrew grammar is better than my English grammar. Okay. What does that mean? Blessing over lighting the Sabbath candle. Someone tell me. Lahadlik ner. And we translate, blessed are you, Lord our God, with the universe who sanctifies through your commandments and commanded us to kindle the Sabbath lights. That's how we translate it. So you see it in all the prayer books. It's wrong. It's not, you gotta understand that in the same way I talked about Torah, there are all these commentaries. It's because when you say there's a volume that Rashi wrote on just the book of Genesis, you say, oh my God. Well, it's because if you really tear apart every word in all the different ways, it's an opus. Okay? If you're going to write a translation of the Bible, you can't do those commentaries, right? You got to just do the translation. There's only so much we can do as human beings. Okay. So lehadlik is the causative form of the word to light. Okay? I am not lighting a candle, am I? I am causing the candle to be lit. Does that make sense?
Okay.
The verb doesn't say, "Blessed are you, Lord God of the universe, who sanctified us with your commandments and commanded us to light the Sabbath candles." The actual Hebrew is, "and commanded us to cause the Sabbath candles to be lit." Do you see the difference grammatically? Okay, Hebrew is much more specific than English. I say this before the Amidah. We have this line, right? Adonai savatai tiftachu fi yagid tehilatecha. God, open up my mouth and ufi and my lips and ufi and my mouth. Yagid tehilatecha. Tehilatecha means your praises. What does yagid sound like? Magid, Haggadah, right? Agadah, it's the same root. It's story, to tell a story. Yagid, like lehadlik, is the causative form of that verb. So literally, it's in what's called binyan hifil. So literally what it is saying is, and cause my mouth to tell your praises. Why is there an important difference? Because the idea is that if it's a causative verb, it means that I'm empty and God is causing me to do something. Do you guys see the difference? Okay. Hikbodadut is in something called Hebrew, in Hebrew grammar, it's called, the conjugation is called hitpa'el. Ita'e. And it takes a verb and it makes it self-reflexive. The word for large in Hebrew, does anyone know? Gadol. GDL, right? Gadol. Yit gadal means he or it caused itself to become bigger. The word for holy is kadosh. Yit kadash, you hear that it sound? Yit kadash means he or it caused itself to be holy. Okay? Hallel means to praise. Right? Yit alel means he or it praised itself. Ole means to ascend. Yit Allah, to cause yourself to go up. Yit romam, to uplift he or it uplifted itself. What's the Kaddish all in? That kind of conjugation. Because we're saying that God, the Shmei Rabbah, God, made itself bigger, made itself more holy. We say after we study, the idea that when we studied, it made God make himself more holy. We say it when we pray, because the idea is our prayers made God make it more holy. We say it when someone dies, the person we remember made God more godly. Do you guys understand that? Okay? Makes sense to everyone? Okay. Yes? Okay, this is grammar. If someone has a question, they can pop it on it. So this is the understanding of the grammar, right? Hitbodadut. So it's in that binyan, that conjugation of hitpa'el. With me? Which means it's self-reflexive. That was good, right? Bod and boded. Now, Hebrew has either a 2-letter or 3-letter root. This one has both. Bod and boded mean both a branch and to be alone. So, hitbodadut or hisbodadus literally, grammatically, means to self-reflexively be simultaneously alone and a branch on a tree. That's meditation. Where you are so, this is the internal meditation, where you are so alone, you are so inside that you realize you're connected with everything. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes or no? Be honest. Okay? Tisbodus. The other type of meditation is something called hitlahavut, which means to self-inflame, to set oneself on fire. Okay? Right? I do both. But yes, to get fired up, right? To get lost in the passion. And so to have that same experience where instead of going inward, to be infinitely small, you become connected to everything. You become infinitely large to become connected to everything. Make sense? Those are the two forms of Jewish meditation. in terms of this to the structure. Okay. So you can't really understand the framework, the structure is explained in Sefer Yetzirah, but here, any of these texts, and you can understand intellectually, but the experience, like love, must be experienced. Otherwise, you're studying about it. The prayer book, the Siddur, and the genius of the Siddur is that if it really can go through you, it becomes a practice, can become a practice that allows you to get into a meditative state. So what is a meditative state? Whether from Hisbodedus, Hitbodedut, or from Hitlahavut. Neurophysiologists have identified that when we are in the zone, okay, we normally vacillate between sympathetic and parasympathetic systems from fight and flight or relaxation, right? You guys remember that from your junior high class? I'm telling you, I started studying this stuff and I realized, boy, I should have paid more attention in 7th grade.
They were on tablets when I took it.
Not these tablets, the other tablets.
Stone ones.
Stone tablets.
So what happens is, like I said, I just had some stone tablets. I totally lost where I was. Okay. So we have all these experiences. What happens to our brain when we're in the zone? Sympathetic and parasympathetic systems overflow and as a result shut down. The hippocampus, which is right here, which goes connecting with the third eye right here, becomes 400% more active. Now, this happens when we dream. It happens when we are in deep meditation. It's a wonderful book called The Mystical Mind, written by 2 neurophysiologists from the University of Pennsylvania, Keely and Newberg, about this work. It happens when people take a psychotropic. It happens when you are in ecstasy. It happens during an orgasm. Okay? All these things change the neurochemistry so that sympathetic and parasympathetic systems shut down, the hippocampus becomes more active. With me? Yeah. If you really understand the Siddur and you really let it go through you, through us, it changes our neurochemistry to that kind of space by the time you get to the Amidah or the Torah service. And it's called a unitary state of being or a heightened state of awareness. Who's ever been in the zone consciously, maybe because of athletics or sport or because of singing or just where you just lost track of time and everything else? We've all done it naturally, okay? It's had an orgasm, it's happened, right? Right? This brief few second experience, yet it feels like a lifetime. For the man, for the woman, it might feel like a few seconds, right? But seriously, right? I mean, all kidding aside, you have certain experiences or dream time, right? You've been in a dream and you have memory of this detailed, lengthy experience, and then you open your eyes because you come out and you realize, wait, I just went to sleep 6 minutes ago. It ever happened to people?
Yeah.
Okay. Time is relative. It goes into a state of timelessness. Does that make sense to everyone? I know this is complicated concepts to talk around and about because we're not really, we're still not saying this is that or this is whatever it is because, again, I want to go back to the idea that as soon as you label it, you're missing the point, right? Everyone with me? Okay. And no one's commenting on any of this, huh? No one's making any comments? Okay. So the two go hand in hand. The experience allowed sages to see, certain sages to see a structure. The structure allows you to go deeper into your experience, which allows you to see a deeper structure. Does that make sense to everyone that way? Everyone following through? Yes? Okay. Yes, no?
I think so.
You know, you love your kid, right?
Yeah.
So you show him you love him. He loves you back. You realize I got a kid loving you, love him.
No, I got that.
Okay. Now, that's all preface to not even talking about what we're not going to talk about that we're going to talk about. All right. So there are a couple of things that happen. And Lurie, again, integrates all this together. So when people say, I took a class in Kabbalah at the University of Judaism or Hebrew Union College or the Kabbalah Center or wherever, what they're talking about is Lurianic Kabbalah. They are not talking about Jewish mysticism. Because we're going back to the roots of it, because it's the only way you can start to explore it. Does that make sense to everyone why I say that now? Okay. Otherwise, it's just dogma. All right. So we've discussed now unification. When you look at first two lines of Torah, you find that there's a phrase, some letters that are not repeated, and they spell the word tzimtzum, which means to withdraw. This is our understanding from Maaseh Bereshit. How does God create the universe? If God is everywhere and in everything, how does God create the universe outside of God? This is, again, the workings of creation. So the idea is God withdraws God's self, creating a vacuum of like a salad bowl, and throws God's sparks into it. And that becomes creation. Does that make sense to everyone? That's Luria's understanding from a number of different texts, that by creating a space, that's where creation can happen. So I can now hold water in my hand. My hands can now hold things. But I'm involved in it. Or if I let go, the water goes away. I've got the boundaries of it, but it's separate from me and yet still part of me. Right? God withdraws and creates this mixing bowl that God then throws more sparks into, like I would put water in my hand, and that becomes ultimately what becomes creation.
Big Bang.
Big Bang. The tohu vavohu, chaos and confusion, we studied in the first week. And then the way it gets coalesced becomes creation. All right. Now, what Luria and our sages do is take all of this and they find the skeleton key. And I harp on this because it's worth harping on. So I'm going to do some erasing here. And that's God's name. Okay, does everyone recognize God's name? You have a Yud, a Hey, a Vav, and a Hey. Right? With me? So this is Yud, this is Hey, this is Vav, this is Hey. Right? And if you take those four letters and you put them vertically, they look like a human being. Do you guys remember talking about this? Okay. But it's more than that. So let's look at this structure for a moment. If this is a human being, can you all see that it looks like a human being? Forgetting about anything you know. You don't know Hebrew, you don't know anything. I just look at you guys as artists, as visual artists. And I say to you, as architects, not even artists, architects, where's the point in this structure that is its foundation point? That is, that if you took it away, the whole structure would go, bloop.
The center.
Well, where in the center? I'm going to move this around. You tell me where you think it is.
There.
There?
Yeah.
Okay, let's look for a minute. You want to erase?
Mm-hmm.
So you want to erase the whole letter?
Yes.
Okay, that's a lot. That's a lot of space. What one point could I erase that will take the whole structure and make it fall down? Look how it's made. Here's the Yud, right? Here's the Hey. Here's the Vav. There's the Hey.
Take the ball back.
That's a lot of space. Well, I'm asking for a point, not a line.
The Bible is holding it all together.
No, that space is holding it all together. This space right here. It's not. You're correct. The Vav is, and Vav means and. It is a connector. But one point is that point right there, isn't it? Do you guys see that? Okay. If I take that little point, it all goes kerplunk. So that point is the foundation of the structure. Do you see that? The word in Hebrew for foundation is yesod. Okay? Where does that correspond in the physical body?
Reproductive.
This whole area. And so this energy, this point is called yesod. Right? Not because sexual energy is the foundation of the universe. Because it's the point that is the foundation of the structure. Do you see the difference? So if I show you a diagram and I pull out a diagram that says, here are the sephirot. Sephirot means wheels or energy centers. Going from Sephir to Tzedakah. And it shows this one, which is right here, right? And it says Yesod or foundation. You can't laugh at my drawings. He's having a cigar in his yellow. Right? And so someone says, I'm looking at a chart, and the sexual organs are called Yesod, and that's why, because sex is the foundation of humanity. Wrong. That's not why it's called Yesod. It's called Yesod because it's the foundation of the structure. Now, what is the place of harmony or balance where everything is harmonized in that structure? This point, right? It's connected to everything. It's in the middle of the hay. You see that? And it's connected, because it's the top of the bob, into the bottom hay as well. So it's a harmony. You can get to everything from there. Does that make sense? Which would follow through where in our physical body? Our solar plexus, right in here. It's a place of harmony. The word for harmony or balance in Hebrew is tiferet. So that energy center right here is called Tiferet. You guys seeing this? Okay. Let's look at the structure a little more. There's a space right here, right?
Yes.
What happens if I close that space? There's no opening to get into this part in the physical world, is there? Right? If the structure looks like this, there's no way to get into this place, is there? Right? Now I've given myself a pathway for God's presence to come in. Right? Does everyone follow me again?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about kosher meat. What can you not eat from? What part of the steak can you not eat?
Sciatica.
The sciatica nerve, which is the hip. Why? Because on the one hand, what happens? Yaakov, remember we spent all this time on the Torah because it was going to come back at us, right? All stems from there. Jacob is this name Jacob. He's a scoundrel. He's a shyster, right? He wrestles with an angel. He gets a new name, Yisrael, right? His whole being changes from being the guy who's the manipulative con man, the guy who's conning things at the heel, to being the one who goes straight on and is wrestling with God, intimate with God. What happens in that story? His hip is wrenched. So he looks like this at the beginning, right? But when he's done wrestling, he looks like that. Everyone following? Why do we eat kosher meat? One reason. If I eat non-kosher meat, like filet, I'm closing that hay up, which means I'm preventing the flow of God from coming in one of the places it can come in. Do you guys see that? Do you see the analogy? Yes? No? This is all very esoteric, complicated stuff. All right. This image of the Yud, Hey, Vav, and Hey, you've heard me say this numerous times, and hopefully now you're going to see why. It is the skeleton key that unlocks everything. It is the skeleton key. It is what the humanity is based on. It becomes the understanding of what Luria, through his understanding of this, is able to create a system where he identifies that there are 10 energy points that correspond to this name and 22 ways of connecting them. What does that mean? How many digits are there? How many numbers are there? How many unique numbers are there?
10,
10. What are they?
0,
0 through 9. It's 10, right? So you have here, these green ones are the 10 points. Here you have it, how it looks like with a human. You see that? Right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You see that? And that corresponds as well hey, Bob, hey. Do you guys see that? That's doesn't work quite so well, so right, there's your Yud, your Hey, your Bob, your Hey. Right, if you look at my body, Yud, Hey, my arms, Bob, my torso, Hey. With me? I am the walking, we all are the walking manifestation of God's holy name. There are 10 points, there are 22 ways of connecting them. Okay? So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, sorry, fix that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, oh, I'm missing, 18, 19, 21, 22. How many letters are in the Hebrew alphabet? Anyone take a guess?
22.
The Sefirot are the structure. They are the points. The letters are the pathway. Sefer Yetzirah discusses and teaches about the structure of the universe in terms of the points. Sefer HaBahir discusses and teaches about the letters as the web. Did I lose anyone, or are you all with me? You both have your arms crossed. Like, I don't know where I am. It doesn't make sense. Yes? No? It makes sense? Okay. Yeah. So it all comes, though, from Torah and from Talmud and from these texts. Do you see that? So when a Saturday morning service happens or a high holiday service happens and the Torah comes out, okay, and we chant these words, Adonai, right? Hagedula, v'hagevura, v'hatiferet, v'hanetzach v'hahod, ki kol b'shamayim uva'aretz, right? Kol b'shamayim means all the heavens, uva'aretz, and in the land.
Can you
So,
tell me what it all means together?
L'cha Adonai, so I'm going to go through that actually. L'cha Adonai, coming God, is all of these. Hagedula, which means the bigness or compassion. V'hagevura, v'hatiferet, harmony, right? Gevura, right? Hanetzach v'hahod, which is an everlasting reverberation and empathy. Ki kol b'shamayim, foundation. Uva'aretz. Those, and guess what Luria calls the Sefirot? Instead of Gedula, which means greatness, he calls it Chesed. Chesed, for compassion. Gevura, strength, Tifer, he calls them those terms. So it's hidden, and by the way, that comes from Tanakh. And in there are a couple places in Tanakh where it says that, and that in that order. And so those words didn't come about because that's the dogma. They come from the text as an understanding of the points that are part of God's name that are part of us. Does that? So, so what happened?
I said, I've always wondered what that chant meant.
That's okay. Most rabbis do too. So, so the idea is when you take all of these things and you lay them over each other, the text of the Tanakh, the Torah and the Tanakh, the Siddur, what we learn in Talmud, what we learn from Sefer Yetzirah, what we learn from Sefer HaBahir, all the understandings from Maseh Bereshit and Maseh Merkavah and Rambam, and what Luria does is he understands, and not only understands, he experiences and knows each of those different levels and clicks them like cogs in a gears in a machine. And that understanding then becomes called Kabbalah. A better term would be Lurianic Kabbalah. Because, but if you don't understand that Sefer Yetzirah is talking about the structure and Sefer HaBahir is talking about the web that ties it together, the points as opposed to the pathways, then you don't get it. Does that? And all of it is about having a conscious experience of Yahud, unification, and having a unitary state of being, a heightened sense of awareness in our brain chemistry. My dissertation was on the spirituality of peak performance. That's what my dissertation was. Okay. There are, which includes a lot of exercises to achieve peak performance that different cultures use. And it might be davening, it might be smoking a chanupa, a medicine pipe of tobacco or cigar, puro. It might be chanting, it might be dancing, it might be breathing meditation, it might be, which would be hitspododus or hitbododu, it might be hitlahavut, dancing. You know? How many have been to a wedding and all of a sudden the band starts going bum, bum, ba-da-dum, bum, bum, ba-da-da, right? And everyone gets in a circle. And does it stay at that pace? No, then it starts going bum, bum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da, right? Right? And you get into this high space. You feel high, right? That's hitlahavut. That's the meditation of being inflamed. We do it, is my point. And we need to do it. Humans need that, but our culture and our tradition teaches that. So this is all an introduction of understanding. It's all based on the other commentators we've discussed as well. But what Luria does is he takes all of these different pieces and he overlays them and puts them into one system. But like anything, if you don't explore the pieces of the structure, it becomes dogma. Okay? It becomes dogma. And that takes us away from the actual experience. Because in the same way that if you could actually see through my eyes, what we both recognize as blue may look very different. What we both say is sweet may be very different. If your experience of Yesod or Tiferet may be very different than my experience of Yesod or Tiferet. If it's about harmony, your harmony is different than your harmony. Make sense how we do this? So this is all a long way of introducing us to what we'll start next week, what we'll do next week, God willing, which will deal with more of the structure and actually doing meditation. Okay? But I think it's really important to spend the time understanding that it's not, you can't let it become dogma. And what it's based on. It's based on the text. Those names are based on the text. It's based on the structure of the Yud, Hey, Vav, and Hey. It's based on the 10 points and 22 letters, because now we've got every digit and every letter. That's all creation, isn't it? In terms of symbols, in terms of explaining anything, language, isn't the 10 digits and every letter of the alphabet cover it all? Right? And yet it covers nothing because it doesn't explain love, does it? that's I really do take issue, especially since Kabbalah in the last, because thank you, Madonna, and all the Kabbalah Center BS, which was the first Jewish organization put on the national list of cults and missionaries. It's such a problem to me when things are taught in a way that this is what that center, that sphera is, that energy center is, that place is. Because that's the dogma. When the reality is your experience and my experience of that same space is very different. We have all in this room, we're all old enough to have been in love. We're all old enough to have experienced the joys of love and pains. We're all old enough to have experienced passion and desire. But what that means for you and what that means for me, they may have nothing to do with each other. Right? I'm always reminded, how many of you remember Annie Hall? You guys remember Annie Hall, the movie? It's a great scene in Annie Hall. It's a split screen. Woody Allen's on one side, Diane Keaton's is. They're each with their therapist. Do you remember this scene? And each of their therapists say, how often do you make love? He says, hardly ever 3 times a week. She says, all the time, 3 times a week. Right? My experience of compassion is my experience of compassion, maybe very different than yours, but it's still compassion. Any of these things that are real, that are numinous, my experience of love, whether it's for my children or my wife or my teachers, may be very different than your experience of love. And we can't get lost in the labels. We need to find the experience, right? That's why we have Hisbodedus meditation. And whether that meditation is sitting in a certain position or doing certain things, or whether that meditation is praying and having services. Okay. Benny and Matt always cut me off because they know I would do Roll Into Dark for a half an hour. I would keep going for a half an hour and not blink. Okay. And you're going, you wouldn't want another half an hour. I didn't do this. I was once at an Erev Rosh Hashanah service. Rosh Hashanah, Erev or morning? I think it might have actually been morning. They did 3 prayers in the entire 3 hours. But they just kept chanting. Has anyone ever been to kirtan singing? Oh. Kirtan singing. Kirtan singing is a call and response that is from the East, from India. Krishna Das, Bhagavan Das are 2 of the great singers of that style in our time. So let me find a Bhagavan Das song. Okay, so this is kirtan singing. It's call and response singing. So it starts off as, okay, so I just want you to, and we're not going to listen to the whole. This is one song that is 28 minutes. And it's recorded. If you're doing this live, because I've been to kirtan singing, 5 hours and they'll have done 4 songs. Okay, so he's doing it, chanting his language, but he'll start repeating. He's chanting the same words, doesn't matter what. Right, that's the pace. Okay, this is the pace. Saying the same words over and over, except what happens is same melody, same everything. It's just gotten into an ecstasy. That's hitlahavut. So whether it's going into an awareness through meditation of Hisbodedus or hitlahavut, whether it's doing it because of kirtan singing, because of davening, because of study, because of meditation, the point is to get to that unitary state of being, the heightened state of awareness in our brain chemistry, so that we are aware of our unification with God.
That chanting is exactly what we did when I was becoming a yoga instructor for like 45 minutes.
You probably did, Bob. How many years ago was this?
10. No, it was 07. So 15?
Bhagavan Das brought it back in the 70s. He brought it to this country. He's actually the one who introduced Ram Das to the Guru. If you want to hear that kind of music, Bhagavan Das is fabulous. I actually brought him to Loyola once. People brought him to Loyola. Krishna Das is also Krishna Das, they all have the same guru, and they all do this kirtan singing. Krishna Das has the greatest name of a 2-set live CD I've ever heard. Krishna Das, Live on Earth for a Limited Time Only. Who's a nice Jewish guy who became this, yoga practitioner. But we do that as well, is my point. That's what a nigun is. Okay? I do a Tu B'Shvat Seder, we do nigunim, right? And in that Tu B'Shvat, how many came to the Tu B'Shvat Seder? Okay. So I do nigunim. I only take a little bit of time. If I had my druthers, I would do each nigun for an hour.
Was the whole point of that to put us in that state?
Mm-hmm. It didn't work, or it did work?
It did work.
To appreciate the unification with the fruits.
Oh, that's what you
Yeah.
told me, yeah, she came home
I've
and told
never
me.
felt like that.
And it's a combination of the light, set and setting, the lighting, the niguni,
Yeah. the whole
right?
thing. Yeah. the light,
So
the light,
all of it, so
yeah.
that you start to experience. That's what every service is. That's the point. Or it's what every service can be, what every ritual can be.
Well, that was really amazing.
So does that? Right, but I would sit there, and except there were people leaving after being here for an hour and a half. So how am I supposed to do? I also think that it makes more sense if we don't do it as one long table next time, because it's just people were there just too far.
It was hard to,
It's just you. I got to use the
Does
microphone, and they're there, and I'm on this side. It just
Yeah.
doesn't.
Yeah,
Doesn't
just
work.
a suggestion, you need to be at the point. down there.
Well, but
Going
no, what we
from
need to be is more in a circle, so
Yeah,
that everyone's
well,
more in a
if you
circle.
can do that.
We can do it. We just need to. So that's okay. We're learning. We're figuring it out. So the point is that every service we do can do that. I say a blessing before teaching, and my energy changes. What's going on in my body changes. I walked in here with a lot of back pain. I may walk out of here, the pain may still be there or gone, but it may come back, it may be gone. But during when I'm teaching it, thank God, gone. Do you see my point? So whether it's a simple by saying our prayers, it allows us to be conscious if we let the prayers go through us, so that each moment becomes we're more aware of the holiness in the moment. Does that help a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about meditation, we talk about mysticism. To me, it's so important we don't talk about Kabbalah per se, because that's just dogma, right? You've already learned, even just in a little bit of time we spent, how important Hebrew itself is to the experience, right? As a pathway. You don't. So to say, I've been studying Kabbalah and I don't know Hebrew. I've never seen a Hebrew letter. I've never looked at the Torah. I've never looked at text. But I gave $180,000 and they told me I really know Kabbalah. Is that what it's about? So Luria takes, and these other commentators are commenting, and Bach here really goes into a lot of the depth of it. Not one of these Ramban does. What Luria really does is he takes all these different pieces, integrates them together in one unified system. But if you don't understand the parts of the system, then it's just dogma. That's why I've spent all this time on this. Which unfortunately is not spent by most people's learning. I think you need to. Does that give you guys a basic understanding of where we are historically? Next week we'll start going through some more of this, and we'll probably spend 1, if not 2 weeks on it, of dealing with part of the class being, here's the pathways, here's the understanding that Luria comes up with, and here's the actual experience of meditation. Okay? Don't worry, we're not going to certainly going Shiva, 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 Shambho, Shiva, Shiva, Shiva. We're not going to do that, don't worry. Okay? So does that help? Are there any questions online? Okay. So hopefully that helps a little bit, and to understand how this relates with each other. Again, my problem or my challenge is what?
Just thinking.
Oh, okay. My challenge is when it's taught as a dogma. There's a great line from Taoism that to the person who does not know the Tao, the way, a tree is a tree and a cup is a cup. To the student of the Tao, a tree is no longer a tree and a cup is no longer a cup. To the master of the Tao, a tree is a tree and a cup is a cup. It's just it's experiencing the tree at a deeper level, experiencing the cup at a deeper level. I think when we get stuck in dogma, we can never get past where a tree's not a tree and a cup's not a cup. Because we're trying to fit our personal experience and our relationship with God into a block, into a box that's may not be the right one for us. As opposed to having our experience and seeing how it relates to that, what Luria did. That's why I spent all this time on the different levels and layers of it. I hope that made sense and helps people, and I hope this was valuable, and we'll take it up next week. We have Shabbat services this Friday, Orlando?
No.
We do not have Shabbat services this Friday.
Oh, okay.
We have a Hamantash and Harol on Saturday
Saturday, yes.
because we could not get the park on Sunday.
We have Talmud and
And we have Talmud and Tobacco on Wednesday night. Oh, Talmud and Tobacco, you guys would love if you can come Wednesday night. It's assuming we may postpone it if the weather's bad to the next week. But Talmud and Tobacco is this week in honor of Purim. It's going to be about addiction and addiction recovery.
I read about that.
Okay, which is what Purim's really about. It's not about a Purim spiel. It's not about, all the dressing. It's actually at the deeper level about addiction and addiction recovery, obsessive compulsive behavior and how to recover with it. It's about finding how do you deal with addiction, whether it's inside yourself or elsewhere. It's about our Yetzer Hara, our evil inclination, and what we need to do with that evil inclination when it happens. Because if you say you don't have a Yetzer Hara, you're a liar. Okay? And so how we deal with it. And how Purim is so powerful for that. So that's Wednesday. And we have Mahjong on Thursday. And I think that's
it for now.
okay. So, and then Shabbat the week after.
Yes.
And again, depending on whether we may cancel the Hamantash or not.
It's supposed to be a nice weekend.
Supposed to be okay after Wednesday, so they say.
You know what? I was so glad that the boys' golf tournament was canceled on Saturday and only played Sunday.
Oh, Saturday was horrible.
Oh, has anyone? I did a funeral.
How did you?
Well, hold on.
get
So
your-
thank you guys for everything and emailing me everything. And I did a funeral the other day.